Seahawks fans, wherever you may be, thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, hi, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers, here to talk Seahawks football. We've officially reached the offseason. Seattle did pull out that win against the Los Angeles Rams in LA about 48 hours ago, and improved to 10-7 on the season, and did not make the playoffs out of that position, which is kind of unusual. Almost every other year you would kind of get in to the playoffs, but this just didn't happen. And then a thing happened that we all kind of predicted would happen, in that Mike Macdonald let Ryan Grubb go less than 24 hours after that game ended. Showed, I think, everyone really that he was serious about making sure that his football team was aligned in all three phases of the game, and the offense just didn't come up to spec in what he was looking for in being physical, running the ball, situational football, and so forth. And so we can talk about all that. We also have a number of names that we're going to talk about today as far as offensive coordinators that we feel like the team will be looking at. There's a number of coaches in this cycle that are quality guys. I think that, if you really listen to what Mike Macdonald is saying, what everyone else is kind of saying, you're automatically thinking a guy that's got NFL experience. So you're not going to be looking at a college coordinator coming up into the NFL. I think you're going to be looking for a guy that really knows how to run the ball, and has been successful at the NFL level at running the ball, and complementary football, is what they call it. Complementing a defense, still running, they're still going to pass the ball. They've got a great passer in Geno Smith. Presumably, if they had anyone else, they would still want to pass the ball effectively. So not worried about that aspect, but improving running the ball would be something that we're going to be talking about a lot today. Welcome in, Keith. A lot to talk about, obviously, and good season overall. I think we're going to skip kind of the recapping of the Rams game. It was kind of meaningless, although we did show some life there on the offensive side. It was kind of an entertaining, fun, enjoyable game to watch.
Against a bunch of backups. Yeah, they showed some life. We'll skip that game. I mean, it's a meaningless game. We're in off-season mode. We're going to wrap up the season. We've got some awards and stuff to give out. That will be our next show. But we really wanted to dive into the Ryan Grubb situation. And let's just start with, you and I have both been predicting this for a few weeks, and that he is legitimately part of the problem. Was he the entire problem? No, offensive line problems existed, but Ryan Grubb problems persisted even beyond the offensive line, and Geno Smith problems were created in part by Ryan Grubb problems. And you can't be such a pass heavy team when you have a defensive minded head coach that wants to run the football and win with physicality.
Yes.
And then you're playing this super passive finesse, pass happy offense that is the exact opposite of what Macdonald says he wants. And so,
well, what I was saying right before we push record was kind of it. It's like he wants to align his philosophy. He's a defensive minded coach. He wants a complementary style offense that helps his defense be better. And you do that by running the ball, time of possession, not turning the ball over. And you'd said, right after I said that, you said, and they didn't do any of those things.
Yeah, they didn't run the ball. They didn't maintain possession of the ball. And Geno Smith was second in the league in interceptions. And so, it makes perfect sense that Ryan Grubb is gone. But now they've got to replace him. And they've got to replace him, and then they've got to install a new offense, and they've got, it's one of those, in this particular case, because he was not good, we'll see what the next person is. Sometimes you move on from a guy and then it becomes a grass isn't greener type of situation. But I don't think that's the case here. This is a guy that was, in over his head. And
I do think that they need to be careful with this hire just beyond the normal logistics of the whole thing. They really do need to align this thing. Now, you can talk about the fact that Ryan Grubb, I mentioned those things as the core philosophical reasons why Mike McDonald made this decision. And I think he made the decision on core philosophical pillars, just differences of the way that they look at football and winning in the NFL versus performance related issues. Like, I think you could make a case to have Ryan Grubb back on a performance basis to give him another shot if he learned certain things, made some adjustments, etc. He's not necessarily a bad offensive coordinator. He was a bad fit, I think, for the personnel groupings that we had this year, and B, for Mike McDonald.
Yeah, he'll get it. Like, he's going to land on his feet. I mean, that's his track record before Seattle as being an outstanding college OC will give him another job. But yeah, he needs to learn. And honestly, the reason why he wasn't given another chance, saying, okay, the offensive line was terrible, let's go ahead and roll this back and let's try and fix the line and make some adjustments and whatever, is because he just refused to run the football. He just refused to run the football. And you heard game after game in the post game press conference, McDonald saying, yeah, we didn't run it enough. We need to run it more. We need to run it more. We need to get in there. We need to be more physical. And then the next game they would come out and throw.
Right. And run 13 plays from the line of scrimmage as run plays, and 40 some odd pass plays. Yeah, it was tough to watch at times. Now, there were some successful games, including the last game against the Rams you mentioned against backups. Yes. But that was, a fun game to watch where the offense was really balanced. Like if that was the way that it looked all year, regardless of opponent, that would have been amazing.
All year, they would be a playoff team.
No, for sure.
You would have been much closer on your prediction of wins than I was. And
you were right on the money. Congrats on that.
But yeah, I mean, if that had happened, they would have been a better team. But it never happened until that. There were two games in which the running game played a key part in the game. And it was the second Arizona game, which they won easily, and this Rams game that they won, maybe not easily, but they were definitely the better team. Okay, there's a lot of backups in there, so take that with what it was. But as far as the players on the field, the Seahawks were the better team. And they did so in both those games by running the ball and being balanced. I'm not talking about, Brian Schottenheimer going to run it 40 times and throw it 13. Like when we say run the ball, we're talking about being balanced, and being able to do both. And Grubb just was incapable of calling that offense. So it's like 75% pass. It's just the way it was week after week after week.
Yeah. So now, when you take a look at the offseason last year, it was a tough situation. So after the NFC Championship game was when Mike McDonald was hired. That's like 2.5 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, right? And you're already seeing coaches requested interviews and all that kind of stuff. So we're literally now entering the coaching cycle at the beginning of the cycle instead of the very tail end. So that's going to help with all of the candidates. Mike McDonald is going to be able to do a thorough, and John Schneider, do a thorough search, evaluation, get the alignment that they're looking for. I think last year they ended up with Grubb as the best last remaining offensive coordinator guy that was out there. Because there really wasn't any that had
a very thin, shallow pool.
Right. And we all got excited about it because granted, you're giving the guy a shot. that has spent his entire career in the college ranks and came from 2 years of the most successful offensive football in college. And so you're excited about the opportunity. And it was a great little opportunity. It just didn't work. And it probably didn't work even from the very beginning. And Mike McDonald just kind of rolled the dice that he thought maybe Ryan Grubb would adapt and change to the NFL game. I think one of the issues is Ryan Grubb didn't have the opportunity to really surround himself with his guys either. There was just Scott Huff, and that was it. That was, tough for him. And then just really didn't know the NFL game and didn't really have they didn't really hire a bunch of guys. Jake Peets was in there as their pass game coordinator. Had been with the team for a little while, to be able to kind of help him with the planning, but it was tough. It was tough to watch. So anyway,
yeah.
Here we are.
Let's talk some replacements.
Let's talk candidates.
You mentioned Jake Peets. To me, I think he's the only internal candidate that will be considered. We know that Mike McDonald really respects him, respects his opinion, all of that. My concern with him, and the reason why I don't think he would be the guy, is because if he was the guy that was going to take over this spot, they should have made this move with Ryan Grubb weeks ago, and promoted,
and giving him some
Peets,
run,
and let him call plays and let's see what it looks like. And yet they waited until after the season was over, which to me tells me that they didn't believe they had the candidate in house. Because if the guy was in house, I think they would have made this move, 6-7 weeks ago.
Well, yes, maybe, but also, I think it does speak to the character of a guy like Mike McDonald to give a guy like Ryan Grubb the full season.
I don't know.
Just from a character standpoint,
it's not working. It's not working. Your season depends on it working. It's a results-driven league, and I could very easily, if they thought Peets was the guy, they could have made that move. Now, I'm not saying that he isn't. I just think that there's a view that he wasn't. I actually like Peets as a potential offensive coordinator in the future, because he is a guy that, he had 2 seasons with the Rams before coming to Seattle. He's the passing game coordinator, so he's got some of the game planning experience, and really, like, he's an experienced guy. He's been, coaching / scouting. He's been around NFL teams since 2006. So I think that there's a guy that, he could warrant,
at
an
least a full
opportunity.
interview. Yeah.
It might not be with Seattle, but he's going to warrant an opportunity to be an offensive coordinator at some point soon.
So let's talk about the known quantities out there. And there's a lot, because we're at the beginning of the cycle. So everyone's available right now. So you got Mike Kafka, the OC and you can stop me at any time. We can go into further conversation. Mike Kafka,
so
OC, New York
let's kind of
Giants.
go through each one a little bit.
Okay.
Kafka is a great name because the Seahawks interviewed him twice for the head coach position last year while they were waiting for McDonald to become available. Yes. And then when he, once they hired McDonald and they could start working on, finding an offensive coordinator, they requested permission to interview him for that. And there was a little bit there, at least to me, where it felt like, they interviewed him. Okay, maybe not, but let's interview him again and get his take on the offense, and maybe having him be the offensive coordinator. But then Brian Daboll, who has since been fired, let Kafka go. Was fired himself. And so therefore Kafka's probably going to be a free agent. I mean, they still have to ask, but a new coach is going to want to come in and bring in his own guys. And so he should be available now, and they would be able to get him. And like I said, Schneider, pre-McDonald, Schneider really liked Kafka. That's why they interviewed
And
him
it's
twice. That's why they
not
asked him
about
for a third time.
production at New York Giants. The Giants ranked 29th in offensive EPA per play and 31st in points per drive this season. It's definitely not about production
Yeah, but their
this season,
offensive
but he
talent
likes,
was trash.
yes, he likes his style and the way that he does things for sure. And he's kind of a Reed disciple, kind of follows that tree.
Mm-hmm.
If you kind of pay attention to those things. So that's definitely probably on a short list, I would think.
Yeah.
Depending on Mike McDonald. Now, that
Mm-hmm.
was John Schneider. What does Mike McDonald want?
Yeah.
Okay. So Doug Peterson's out there. He was fired from the Jaguars. I don't see that necessarily as a good fit. But I could see somebody with a lot of experience as an NFL coach and been around offenses for a long time to be able to come in, because you almost have a guarantee that at least it's going to be functional. And I think,
Yeah.
McDonald at least wants functional.
Peterson's a guy that's viewed as a great offensive coordinator, but not necessarily a good head coach. And they're different skill sets, so I can see that. He was the play caller as the head coach in Philly when they won the Super Bowl. Later let go and went to Jacksonville, and they kind of stagnated there. But for him to chance to come in and just be the offense might be a chance for him to
And he was Andy Reid's offensive coordinator in Kansas City for a minute there as well.
Yeah. The other part that would be nice there is that he would be fairly autonomous. It wouldn't require the McDonald to be sitting over his shoulder a lot, because guy's been a head coach for multiple teams. He knows how to run these things. So that is a possibility. Mike McCarthy, I think, would be a terrible
Mike McCarthy, presumably being let go in Dallas. I agree. I think there's just too much baggage there. But I wouldn't hate it. I don't think Mike McDonald would be overlooking his shoulder the whole time. I think Mike McCarthy would be there to build his resume back up and leave.
The league has passed Mike McCarthy by, and we saw that in Green Bay. And he took a year off and kind of reinvented his scheme and that kind of stuff. But then it's stagnated these last couple of years, and teams have figured out what he's doing. I don't think he's a guy that you want going forward. I think he's a guy that if he's going to continue his career as a coach, it's going to be at the college level.
Brian Schottenheimer's still out there, current offensive coordinator for the said Cowboys we've just been talking about. Okay, now let's get into some kind of interesting names. Jason Vrabel is the Packers passing game coordinator. He's been around football for a while, about 10, 12 years. Matt LaFleur, coaching tree, since 2019. The Packers are kind of a team that play complementary football, which is what Mike McDonald says he wants to do. Be able to run the ball effectively and pass as well, but they run the ball very effectively there. Mike LaFleur, offensive coordinator with the Rams, doesn't call plays, so he could ultimately can be picked off if they wanted to, if he, had a play calling.
Again, he's a guy that would be viewed as autonomous. He's been a head coach, that kind of stuff, and is highly regarded by the Rams. Like, they let him call plays and stuff in that final game, and they really like him. They credit him for a lot of what they've done well this year offensively. So that would make sense, especially if you look at what they've done with Kyron Williams and that running game. Like, it would make a lot of sense.
Dave Ragone, the LA Rams quarterback coach, staying with the Rams, spent 3 seasons as the OC for the Atlanta Falcons prior to joining the Rams. The Falcons finished 9th in rushing offense, had 127 yards rushing per game. I think Seattle was about 96, I think, in the
Yeah.
end.
No, it was lower than that. It was like 80. It was 89, I think, going into the last week, which was it's just crazy low.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But at the same time, he also, they had a great passing offense while he was there as well. Um, all that kind of stuff.
So another name would be Clint Kubiak.
Yeah.
Um, he's been quarterback coach, passing game coordinator, offensive coordinator at a bunch of different stops over 11 seasons. He's only 37, so he'd be right there age-wise with McDonald. This is the son of Gary Kubiak, who
Yes.
was offensive coordinator for the um, Denver Broncos when they went on that run where they kept just penciling in random names and having 1,000-yard rushers.
He
And
was
then
the backup quarterback to John Elway
yeah.
at one time, too.
And then Gary Kubiak went on to Houston, where despite only having Matt Schaub as a quarterback, managed to have them a perennial playoff team. Really, um, Gary Kubiak was the brains behind the second wave of zone
Yes.
um, blocking scheme stuff. Like,
Under Mike Shanahan. Right.
yeah. Um, so I mean, it's like there was the initial setup, which was there in Denver, and then he took over and was like the second generation of that, added a whole bunch of things to it, and then took that with him. So Clint's his son, learned
He's
a lot of
very
stuff with
well thought of.
yeah, he's pass game coordinator in the 49ers in 2023. He's bounced
Yep.
around, but he's a guy um, that is really well thought of. And at 37, like, you get that kind of young energy that you got with McDonald, and a guy that's viewed as being just really freaking smart. I could see that being a fun hire.
Yeah, he was the offensive coordinator for a minute with the Minnesota Vikings for one season. We coached under Kevin Stefanski, who's very well thought of. Even in Cleveland now, they didn't have a winning season, but they're keeping Kevin Stefanski because he's a good coach. And they kind of developed that wide zone scheme that the Kubiaks were famous for, and the Vikings had the sixth best rushing offense in the NFL and fifth in passing yards per attempt during the time that Kubiak was there. This would be a hire, I think, that I could see Mike McDonald making in fairly quick order. Like, he was the offensive coordinator for New Orleans. Their entire staff was let go after the season. He's available. I think he's philosophically aligned in the run game with Mike McDonald. And I think he's young, so he fits in the culture of what they're trying to do and build now with in Seattle. So that would be a name I would definitely keep track of. I think he's going to be in the conversation. I would be surprised if he's not.
What about T. Martin, a guy who's the quarterback coach for the Ravens, which means that he knows McDonald and has been really pivotal in the development of a guy like Lamar Jackson, who is known as a runner but not a passer, and is now one of the league's more prolific passers. So that would make sense. And similarly, Mark Brunell, who is currently the quarterback coach of the Lions and has been there for 3 years, those same 3 years that you've seen Jared Goff go from being a mediocre at best quarterback to being what he was this year, which was absolutely phenomenal. And so you've got guys that are proven quarterback developers that you could see coming in and taking that role. If the Seahawks go young at quarterback with a JJ McCarthy type move, a guy like one of them, or even Brian Schottenheimer, who we brought up earlier briefly. Like, Schottenheimer, we know is kind of a bad offensive coordinator, but he'll run the ball, and two, he's a great quarterback coach, one of the best out there. And if you've got a young kid, if you've got a McCarthy, you could do far worse than having a guy like him or Martin or Brunell in there, not just in charge of the offense, but in charge of developing your quarterback. And so that's one of those things. If you've got a vet, if they run with Geno and they don't make any adjustment, any move to go get a young guy, then okay, maybe those three names don't make a lot of sense. But um, if they do go young, finding a quarterback developer is not a bad plan.
In addition to Kubiak on my list of effective offensive coordinators that have experience and run the ball effectively and have had a lot of success in the league running the ball, the other guy at the top of my list there is Alex Van Pelt.
Okay,
Spent the
yeah.
2024 season with the Patriots as the offensive coordinator there. Obviously didn't have any success there. That whole staff was let go. But he came from Cleveland under Kevin Stefanski. I just talked about Kubiak and that relationship. Well, Van Pelt basically built the offenses at Cleveland, and they're successful running the ball there. And then Kubiak was kind of under that framework, both in Minnesota and at Cleveland. And so the reason I say that is because Cleveland's in the hunt for a new offensive coordinator under Stefanski. And they're looking at the same guys we're looking at because they have the same offensive philosophy that I think that Mike McDonald wants to adopt, which is a balanced offense, successfully running the ball, can run both the power and wide zone schemes. And those two offensive coordinators could get it done, I think, for Seattle.
Another name as far as experienced guys that I'm intrigued by would be Frank Reich, a guy who won a Super Bowl as a head coach in Philly. But then his staff was pilfered, including Doug Peterson, who left, and things fell apart in Philly. And so that he was kind of viewed as maybe, or actually I did that backwards. He was the offensive coordinator there. And when he was picked off that staff, things fell apart for Peterson. And so he was highly viewed as an offensive coordinator, went to the Colts. Things worked for a little bit, then they didn't. Things kind of bottomed out for them on a talent aspect. Moved on to the Panthers for a little bit and coached for about a year and a half there before being let go. Clearly, probably done as a head coach candidate anywhere, but the guy is viewed as a phenomenal offensive coordinator, and one of those things where if he's sat out for the league for a year, if he wants to come back, he'll be looking for an opportunity where he can come in, be an offensive coordinator, and have a shot to take an ascending team to the playoffs and be a big part of that. So he's a guy that would be really interesting. He would be interested in Seattle. I mean, this is a team that finished when he was in Indy after Andrew Luck retired, which left them quarterbackless and really a mess. They still finished, in the top 6 of passing touchdowns for a couple of years in a row. So, I mean, the guy clearly knows football. Maybe he's not a guy that you want as your head coach, but you're not asking him to be your head coach. You're asking him to be an offensive coordinator.
So there's a couple of NFC North coaches. We talked about Green Bay coach, but there's a couple of Vikings, a couple of Lion coaches. Josh McCown, Vikings quarterback coach. He's known around the league as being an up and comer, and a guy that eventually is going to head coach in this league. And he would be the next step for him is to get into an offensive coordinator job. And I think he's going to be on an interview list this year. And I don't know if it's going to be with Seattle, but he's a name that's going to be out there. The other guy is, you mentioned Mark Brunell, Lions quarterback coach as well. Wes Phillips, another Vikings coach, grandson of Oilers coach Bum Phillips, son of longtime defensive coach Wade Phillips. Wes Phillips is a guy that is a young up and coming kind of guy as well.
Wade Phillips is polarizing name. Absolutely. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's my initial intrigue is like, oh God, no. But okay, give the kid a break from his parent. Like, he's his own man. So, but yeah,
So two more guys out of the NFC North. Tanner Engstrand, Lions passing game coordinator. Everyone wants a little piece of that, and if he can bring Ben Johnson's offense to Seattle, do they
that's
entertain
why I
that
was thinking
idea?
Mark Brunell. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's where the Mark
Adams
Brunell name came from.
Stenovich, the Green Bay offensive coordinator, doesn't call plays, so it would be an upgrade if he did. That's why they
Mm-hmm.
could go offer him a job. He's been around a little bit. He
That's a good
was
offense to mimic too. The way they run the
yeah,
ball, the way they play action things, roll. Uh, him around and throw off the run. They do a lot of things well that you'd like to see Seattle be doing, or at least trying. Like play action.
right.
What about Stanford or former Stanford coach David Shaw? A guy that
I was going to write his name down, and I
he
just
was.
didn't.
He's he was Jim Harbaugh's offensive coordinator at Stanford. Chose to stay there when Harbaugh went to the NFL. Harbaugh wanted him with the 49ers, but Shaw chose to stay. And he was basically at Stanford. He was a lifer. He was going to be there forever. But things fell apart at Stanford because he was no longer allowed to recruit because of California's COVID rules. And between that and then the NIL stuff happened and whatever, he basically was like, yeah, I can't compete as a head coach in college football anymore. And so he's been out, but the guy is an offensive mind. He knows he knows offensive football. He knows how to motivate guys. He's really, really well respected and has been for a long time. Um, I think that would be a great hire. You seem to differ in that opinion.
Well, I mean, the lack of NFL experience, I think, is the big one there, and I think Mike McDonald's not gonna do that this time around. But anything can happen. Just it's based on relationships and alignment on philosophy and all that kind of stuff. You never know. You get two guys in a room and a couple beers later and 4 hours of philosophical talk on how do they want to operate the offense. Things happen. So, and that's pretty much it for my list. I got a couple other names, but they're insignificant. You kind of overwhelm after a while anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about all these things, it'd be nice to be able to get down to where we can talk about who's interviewing, because then you can kind of see patterns and you can see an emerging top two or three list, and it's easier to have that discussion. I wouldn't be surprised if Jake Peets is a finalist just out of courtesy and the relationship that they built there, and then I wouldn't be surprised if it was Clint Kubiak and maybe T. Martin because of the relationship that Mike McDonald has with the Ravens quarterback coach, and then Alex Van Pelt just because of the philosophical alignment. A guy like that would be just not necessarily run first, but run dominant kind of offensive coordinator where he really wants to take over games, being physical, running the ball.
Yeah. Absolutely.
We've got a couple good shows coming up. We were going to do the before we knew Ryan Grubb was terminated. We were going to do the season-ending season grades show, and that'll be fun. We're still going to do that show, our next show, and then we're going to move along right away into, I think, the salary cap show is the next one on the horizon, probably early next week. Get everybody ready for roster construction mode. What do we need to do? How do we make space? Whose contracts are going to be tough to retain? What can we do as far as restructuring or extending? And then we'll talk about free agency. We'll talk about the draft, all that stuff. So we've got, everything is planned and coordinated through the first part of May. And all the weeks are filled with all sorts of good stuff. So anything else? And we'll get out of here.
No. We just threw out a whole bunch of names, and that was it was only 35 minutes, but honestly, that was enough content for at least an hour. Thanks for sticking with us and putting up with all of that. But yeah, there's a lot here, and you're right. The waiting for the first round of interviews, we can get a feel for what McDonald and Schneider are planning on doing. Everything we said today is based on speculation, either by us or by other people in the media, people around the league. And they're all good names. Okay,
Right.
not all of them. They're mostly good names. But who are the Seahawks actually looking at? Right? Just because a guy makes sense on paper to us doesn't mean that the Seahawks are even considering them. I don't think they're going to go in a weird way. Like, I saw Brock Heward mention Penn State's offensive coordinator.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Because he does a lot of, he's very creative in the run game and all of that. But I'm like, yeah, he runs a lot of option, which doesn't happen in the NFL. And it's another situation of bringing college offense to the NFL and hoping it works. I don't know if McDonald wants to tie himself to that for another year, because if it doesn't work, now he's 2 years in and hasn't won, not because of his side of the ball, but because of the other side of the ball. So, but yeah, I mean, we'll see.
The only
Maybe
guy I think he would
nuanced.
take a chance on is Pete's. Everything else is going to be a known quantity, known relationships in the league, known success, and a guy that can promise to stick around at least two seasons. I mean, those are going to be basically the criteria for Mike, because he's not going to want to take that chance again. That chance was already taken, and now they've moved on from that. Now they're on to proven commodity. Let's get this thing solved. It's not rocket science. We don't need, a brand new up and coming 35-year-old wonderkind kind of coach that comes out of nowhere. We're not really in that space right at this minute. We've got that on our defensive coordinator, head coach guy. That's good. Now let's get that rock solid foundational piece for the offense.
So you're saying
so that
no
we
to
can
Kubiak.
ensure. Well, he's got the experience though. I mean, he can be 37 years old, but that kid brings in 15 years of coaching experience. That's different for me.
Because he's been coaching since he was in his 20s. He just went straight from college into coaching because he was able to coach under his dad, and has gotten away from his dad and coached for a variety of coaches and a variety of systems, learning and not just having it purely be, nepotism for him having employment. And so, he's 37, but he's been coaching for a long time now. God, honestly, there's just something about that name. I really like the idea of Clint Kubiak. Goddamn, I could see that working really well in Seattle. And maybe, I don't know, maybe it's wishful thinking, but that's just early like thought process on all of this. That's probably my favorite name that we've talked about.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, for me, I think it's an alignment with Mike McDonald. I mean, I really do. When Mike McDonald says that's the reason that Grubb's no longer here, and that's what I'm looking for when I'm going to go hire, I believe him. And I think that's the guy that checks all the boxes. Now, when you get him into a room, do you guys jive together? Is he easy to get along with? Is he got a great work ethic? Obviously he's been in the league a long time. He's got a reputation. All those things are kind of, check out. And, I think they'll make a decision within the next week and a half. I think this goes very rapidly. I think John Schneider started this process no later than after the Jets game, as far as a coaching search. Like he was like, full court press, we're not running this back. That Mike McDonald and him probably had conversations. That's the way things go.
Which is why I was surprised that they waited until now. If Peavy was going to be the guy,
there's a reason why. There's a reason why.
They should have made this move weeks ago. They could have
This
possibly
is
saved this
here's
season.
here's one of the reasons I think that they wouldn't do that. Maybe the primary reason, and it comes down to the core foundational belief in your franchise that you are stable, you have good coaches, a quality program. You're not going to pull the rug out of, from under somebody. You never know what kind of promises were made at the beginning of the season. Maybe, you're honoring, certain things. And so I think it's more of this is the way that we run the franchise, and we're going to stand by it, and we're not going to disrupt that sort of a thing, because while you say that happens, it does happen. You get interim here and interim there across the NFL, but usually those things happen to bad franchises. And I don't know that they necessarily want to carry that rep around.
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you that. It was obvious it wasn't working. If they're already putting together coaching lists after the Jets game, and they think PV
they were putting coaching lists together after a certain point with Pete Carroll last year.
Yeah,
but they weren't going to interim him out of the office.
No, but there wasn't an advantage to doing so. Interiming Grubb out of the offense gave PV an opportunity to call plays, which is something he's never done. And it would give you a 4 or 5 game evaluation of a potential candidate. And that has long-term value. It really does. And if it works, then all right, you've got your guy. You just take the interim tag off of him and keep going. And if it doesn't, if it's not working, if he doesn't have, those kind of chops, he's not ready for that yet, then you open your search back up. Like there was an advantage to it because you could have evaluated that in-house candidate.
But also you were still in a kind of a championship mindset, still in a playoff mode, still in the hunt. And to make a radical in-season change for a playoff team like that, even if the offense is going that poorly, I think I can see what you're saying. I mean, I agree that it would provide valuable insight, and potentially have your new OC, but also there's some
you
downsides.
have Dan Campbell took play calling duties away from his offensive coordinator mid-season a couple of years ago.
That maybe I could see happening.
And this was before Johnson was brought on to be their offensive coordinator. Now you're right. If Durday had been the guy doing the defensive play calling and McDonald had taken over control of that, like that's the type of thing that you'd see. You're not really, if you had just transferred play calling duty and say, Grubb's not calling plays anymore, PV's going to do it. But then you leave Grubb in as the offensive coordinator, which just has to do with meetings and planning and all of that. But who's calling the plays? And so they could have totally done that.
It's a soft landing exit for Ryan Grubb, essentially.
Yeah, because it essentially tells him and everyone else that this is over, and allows teams to start looking at if they want to hire him, especially college teams that are, putting together new coaching staffs. And then it also gives you a chance to evaluate your in-house guy.
All right. So we're going to get out of here. Next show will be the beginning of all the fun stuff this off season. I mean, we're kind of done. We're done with the 2024 Seahawks. It was a good run. It was a good season. Our award show.
We have our award show.
We do have our award show. Yeah. Yeah, we're going to do that. That's what I mean by fun. We'll pull that together, and then we'll just start talking about all the off season stuff that we really enjoy. We both kind of really enjoy digging into the roster construction management aspect of team building, and doing all of that is kind of the bread and butter of this show in the off season for sure. If you followed us at all for the last 8 seasons, you'll know that. We don't take any time off. We'll come at you with all sorts of original content throughout the entire year, but especially this time of the year, we really kind of study a lot and bring a lot of quality content in. So, all right, find Keith on Twitter and Blue Sky at Myers NFL. You can do the same for me at NW Seahawk. The show is Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Find us on your favorite podcast platform and our YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button, share the show, like it, leave a comment. We'd really appreciate all of that. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.